What is up, guys? It's Mason once again, bringing you round 3 of the Olympiad Ghana's POV. It's currently 10:30. I just got back home since I stopped the stream, so I'm a bit tired, so forgive me if I do skip 1 or 2 lines. But let's quickly get straight into it. We're going to start with the first game. I mean, this girl just stole my heart. Hepzibah. I've heard so much about her gameplay that she does well, but it's my first time actually seeing her play, and I was pleasantly surprised. So we have here d4. Hepzibah is playing white against her candidate master opponent Carilo Maval. Hepzibah plays d4, knight f6, and then she goes e3, and I'm like, oh, she's playing a collie. I was kind of hoping for a London, but then this made me think, okay, collie. We have g6. Knight f3, bishop to g3, bishop to e2, which is a bit passive. Now, I mentioned during the stream that when I was starting out in chess, whenever my opponent castles, whenever my opponent creates this flanketed pawn structure, I'd like to put the bishop here because I feel like the bishop here is staring at a brick wall. So I put the bishop here for 2 reasons. It feels like it's doing more, and if h4, h5, and knight takes, my bishop can take. Right, but now that I've studied this whole idea with sacrificing the rook for a strong attack, I think it's always a good idea to want to put your bishop here at d3 because the bishop is more active and it actually creates more problems in this square. But bishop e2 is fine. We have d5, castles kingside, b3, and I'm like, oh, Holly Zuckertwort, which is also like one of my favorite openings, right? Besides the London system, which is my top favorite, the Holly Zuckertwort is also one of my favorites. I studied a short course from Judith Polgar concerning the structure, and I mean, I get very nice positions from it. And so we have c5, most expected move, d takes c5, and then knight e4. And here I went on a spiel about how that she missed the whole point of this diagonal. Like c4, again, she's quite new to the game, so c4 looks like a hanging pawn, but it's actually not a hanging pawn. You have weakened, you recently, after playing b3, weakened this diagonal, so you have to like be very much aware. So you could play, for example, c3 here. That way, if takes, everything is fine. You don't want to really like take this way, and so that's basically one of the things. The next is you can just put your bishop here. If your opponent takes, you don't take with the bishop, you take with the pawn. Yes, you keep the bishop kind of like locked. But it seems Hepzibah didn't really know these like positional ideas, which is why she went d takes c5. And of course, it's not losing, but then like black takes sort of the initiative here. So we have now immediately knight to e4. And there's a problem here. You can't really defend it with your bishop. You can play this. You can't also play this, sorry. And now black is actually taking control over the game. We have knight to d4, and here I was expecting e5 by black, forcing the knight back, and maybe you could try reopening the squares again with a move like, let's say, d5 here. Right, so that's kind of like what I was calculating in this position, but unfortunately her opponent plays knight takes c5. We have knight to d4, e5 finally, knight to b5. Very scary square to put your knight because you're running out of squares. a6, knight to c3, d4, which is actually slightly inaccurate. The better move is this. Again, it's understandable why you would play e4, because if d4, because if you did play e4, you kind of reduce your ability to break in the center, right? This kind of like resolves that whole pawn tension, and you have this sort of backward pawn, but then you really make it difficult for your opponent to fight for anything in the center. So e4 would make more sense, but I did fully understand, and I kind of agree with the d4 move. It's more in your face, while this is more positional, so that's completely fine. We have d4, knight c to e4, pawn takes, knight takes, and then queen to b6, and then we have queen to d6. Again, you might wonder if this move is playable. Not so much now, especially with the weak diagonal and the weak f file, so not so much now. We have queen to b6, queen d6, knight to c6, and you could see here that Hepzibah is really trying to go for the trade here. She's trying to go for the trade. Maybe she thinks she can get an easily winning position after that, and that's completely fine with me. Here now we have e4, unveiling the bishop's attack, but now it's not so strong anymore. Rook just simply comes into b1, rook to e8, bishop to b2, bishop f8, bishop to c2. Very beautiful move here by Hepzibah. She's like, oh, you think my knight is hanging? Take it. And then you run into this, right? A very beautiful line here. And white is very much in control. So for her to actually see this tactic was beautiful. So bishop to c4, knight d8 by her opponent, defending this square. And unfortunately here, Hepzibah possibly lost sight of the board, because when you look at this knight which is being attacked by the bishop, it really doesn't have any squares except a4. So here the move should have been knight to a4, but unfortunately Hepzibah goes rook b to d1, and immediately goes down a piece. I mean, she just goes down the piece. Her continuation did not really help much. I was kind of hoping that, okay, fine, you've messed up, but if you really want to give yourself a chance, then maybe you just go takes, and then the same idea, except this, you are down a piece, so it doesn't really work as much. And maybe you can try for something here. Maybe here she could try for something. But unfortunately, that is not what happened. And with the variation she went for after the mistake, it became very easy for her opponent to dominate. And unfortunately, Hepzibah loses the game. But again, regardless, I loved how she played in the opening. Middle game, she did quite well. Her opponent also didn't play the best, but I didn't expect her to do as well as she did. At some point in time, I was even rooting for her to win, but unfortunately, she didn't win. Next game is the game between Gertrude and Castillo, Bettia, Ashley, Alexandra. They have very interesting names. Here, Gertrude is playing as black, and she's playing against the women's FM, so she's highly underrated for this game, right? She's 17-12 and her opponent is 20-71. And let's see how this game goes. So we have d4, d5, c4, queen's gambit, c6, the Slav defense, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, 3 knights, and then a6. Again, I'm not a Slav expert, but a6 usually doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I was thinking through the match that maybe the point of a6 is if maybe you want to go like bishop here and your opponent goes takes, let's say e6 for the sake of it, e6, let's say here, if takes, you don't want to run into this. This is what I was thinking. That's why you play a6, but I don't know. Maybe one of you can educate me in the comments. a6 felt very slow. In my opinion, I was thinking maybe you just go bishop or something. But that's fine. We have c takes, bishop to f4, knight to c6, e3, bishop to g4, bishop to d3, e6, h6, bishop h6, g4, bishop to g6, and knight to e4. That is all fine. Bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, bishop to d6, bishop g3, rook c8, f4. And now it becomes very clear here. Gertrude is going for something on the queen side, and white is going to try something on the king side. But white has to be very careful about this attack, because if it doesn't work, your king is going to be very loose after black is able to break away or make some sort of advantage on the queen side. So it's a very dicey position, not easily winning and not really unclear at this point, but it remains to be seen. So finally we have bishop to b4, bishop to h4, pinning the knight, and queen to a5. I was saying something very funny here, that if you play this, you can just continue with the game. You can take, you can do so many things. But this pin is very dangerous, and it allows, like, at some point, black to go knight to e4, and you drop a pawn. So here we have castles kingside. Again, makes sense. You're planning to open things up. This rook will be very good here, but your position is quite loose. And there's something that her opponent misses, which Gertrude takes advantage of immediately. We have bishop takes c6, pawn takes, knight takes, pawn takes, and then knight jumps in here, immediately hampering on this backward c-pawn weakness that white has. And basically what's going to happen is that your opponent is not going to have enough defenses over this, or your opponent is going to concentrate too much of the defenses over this pawn, eventually you're going to win the pawn and everything collapses for white. You could even just try and lock down white's pieces to the defense of this pawn and do other stuff before eventually cashing in on this weakness. So we have bishop to e1. I like the move here, rook to c4, preventing the pawn push. We have rook to f4, b4, b5, rook takes e4, pawn takes e4. Winning an exchange is always good. Queen takes e4, castles kingside finally. This attack has really died down, so there's not really much going on here. We have h4, queen to a3, as always, still piling up here. You can always give the rook back. And like we said, winning this pawn in particular, you get the chance to create a pass pawn here. And this position is going to be very good for black. So Gertrude is winning. Queen to c2. And then here, to the shock of myself, Gertrude plays rook to b8 here. Now, during the stream, before she played rook to b8, I was saying that, oh, it's a very simple plan here. Maybe not so simple. You just pile up pressure on this guy. And for example, let's say rook to c8, rook to c8, and the move naturally comes in, b5, b4. Right? Because if your opponent takes, he's losing. If he doesn't take, you take and you have a passed pawn. This position is golden for black. I thought it was a straightforward plan that anyone could see. But then, I mean, not to be too harsh to her. I'm sorry if I'm sounding a little bit too harsh. Maybe it's also the tiredness. But rook to b4, it's fine, but it doesn't really take advantage of the file here. Because if you could, I mean, you could play b4 here even if you wanted, right? But maybe there was something she was afraid of. Maybe there was something she was afraid of. We have rook to b8, queen to b3, rook to a4, queen to c2, h6, sorry, g5, takes, b4. Finally, b4 comes in, but not in the right context. Of course, what she's looking for is this. Is what she's kind of hoping for. But it's, again, you always have to be worried, careful, sorry, in case you make a mistake. We have g6. And Gertrude plays here b3. I was saying that with how she was playing, I was thinking she was going to play this way, which is not bad. This is also winning. But after b3, the move I expected from white is this, which seems to create issues for the opponent. But unfortunately, we get g takes rather, king takes, pawn takes, queen takes, check. And now Gertrude is in a winning position, but you have to be very careful, especially with this very strong pawn weakness. The only negative thing for white here, which is actually a very big deal, is that white is literally sort of like down a piece because this bishop is really stuck behind the pawns and can't really make headway. So it's up to Gertrude to sort of create problems for the opponent, and she does so very well. Takes the pawn on a4. Queen to a6, and then she tries to start moving, pushing the pawn. And this pawn it's very likely to get promoted. You just have to always watch out for your clear weaknesses in the position. So queen to e7, you play pawn push. Why? The clear weakness here has been defended. Maybe you have to watch out for moves like d4, 5, takes, but it doesn't really work now. It doesn't really work now. Now we have bishop to h4. Again, not really a threat now. There is a line I will show. You can in this position, trying to remember the line. Forgive me if I'm struggling here a bit. What was happening here? She played rook here, targeting the queen. Queen comes back, rook comes in, and you come in again. Queen comes in, goes. Queen comes in this way, trying to hold the pawn, preventing the pawn from moving. And Gertrude goes queen to g6 check. King moves and then she wins the pawn. Very nice. The opponent comes in, threatening the pawn again. You can simply come in this way to hold the pawn and then push again. But Gertrude goes for check and then she comes back here. The opponent goes back to the pawn and I'm like, okay, now you target, queen goes back up, And then what do you call it? What was the move here? You could go queen to e7. You could go queen to, is it e7? You go queen to e7. You could go here. I'm sorry, I'm very I'm kind of forgetting the lines here, but basically she allowed her opponent to defend the position again, which was not what you're looking for. Yes, I think the move was to simply go this way, and after here, then you have check. Then after the king moves, wherever the king moves, now you have this move, right? Again, and you can try and keep pushing the pawn. You always have to watch out for this, but now this doesn't really cause problems for you. You can still go pawn push in this position, right? So that was the move I was looking at. But we have queen to f7. The queen goes back and it's like white is fighting for a draw. Queen to d7, bishop comes in. Queen to d5, queen comes in. And here I was expecting pawn push. The only issue of pawn push here is a very funny move. Bishop to f6. And I was looking at this for a while before I think I realized that the engine was suggesting this. And the point is, if you take and I take, you really have to deal with this. Now, the way out is to go check. King moves, check again. This intermezzo move, I didn't really get why the engine was recommending it. But then after the king moves wherever he wants to move to again, you have this move. And your opponent cannot really trade off the pawn now. Regardless of wherever your opponent is going to move to, you are just going to keep moving the pawn, right? So yeah, that was the funny move you have to watch out for, but it was completely fine. So, but that's not what happened. We have rook to f8, which actually even makes the defense against this whole idea better. Queen comes in here attacking the pawn, and now the defense is very clear. Queen comes in here and you're going to start pushing, and with the rook here you could even do some serious damage to your opponent. But here queen to c6 again, queen to e7, rook f3, bishop, rook takes, and now allowing pawn push. I don't know if you could just take this way. I think her problem is if I take this way, then there's check here and then my opponent wins this. So she wanted to avoid that, or even there's intermezzo. So this is fine. And in this position, after check here, you can just block with the rook. Like rook comes into f8 and you are completely fine. I don't know what Gertrude was scared of here. But then there's this move. Queen comes in, check, 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 and then eventually this game ends in a draw, which was sad to see, because I mean she could have clearly beaten this player and then gotten possibly a candidate master. I don't really know the special conditions for candidate master. I know you should get a rating of 2000, but I don't know the special conditions. Okay, so that was Gertrude's game. So we are done with the female section. Now we are going to the open section. And we are going to look first of all at Clinton's game. Clinton's game was very interesting. I don't remember all the intricacies of the position, so bear with me. Funny enough, when this game started, I thought Clinton was actually playing as white because of the first move, c4. Clinton, I used to know him to play the English. But then we have c6, knight f3, knight f6, b3, d4, bishop to f5, e3, e6, knight c3, bishop to d6. And here I was saying that Clinton should now welcome himself to the London System Club. As much as you can talk trash about the London system, you just can't help yourself but to play it. h6, knight d4, bishop to h7, f4, knight bd7. And it looks like, I was kind of wondering what this kind of structure is, but it looks like a stone wall. I don't really know. But yeah, this is a strange English. I don't really see a lot. I don't really know. Castles, castles. And then we have the move d3. D3 in when I was trying to understand this position, I felt was trying to uncoil the position to possibly create an attack at some point. I don't really know the theory here. Rook to c8, queen to d2, a6, stopping knight from coming in here. Again, like similar to the Gertrude game, after takes. Again, maybe knight there is a problem. I don't know the prophylaxis, the reason for the prophylaxis here. Rook a to d1, rook to e8, knight jumps to f3. We have bishop to c5, pinning. Okay, the point for the knight moving is so that we can start uncoiling the position, either with uncoiling the position with e5, e4, but then we have bishop to c5, taking advantage of the pin. The king moves away and then knight jumps in. The point is, if you keep trying to push this, I do have problems for you. Sorry, here. Aha. So eventually the knight comes back to d4. Queen goes into h4, creating threats, forcing the trade. You could argue that this trade is detrimental to black because you are allowing, in a closed position like this, you're allowing your knight to be traded for a bishop. But it's not so bad here. We have rook to f3, e5, trying to open up the position and maybe do something. Rook to g3, queen to h5. F takes e5, knight takes e5, and then we have knight to a4, and Clinton plays a very nice move here, knight takes d3. And you'll be like, wait, this doesn't really make much sense. Like, what's the point? Takes, and maybe things are more or less opening up for me, right? Because of this whole kind of stress or pressure in the position. Maybe e5 comes in at some point, I don't really know. But it looks like a strange idea to go for. But the point is this. You can't really win my bishop. This is a strong bishop for black. But you can't really win it. Because after takes, there's this wonderful move. Queen takes fd1 check. After queen takes, then we have knight fork. And after you move the king and I take here, you have a bishop that is needing assistance. So, and if the bishop is to run away, then you have this, right? So many things are going on well for Clinton here. So yeah, the opponent sees that and then plays the move rook to f1. We have bishop to d6, targeting the rook, creating threats for a checkmate over here. But unfortunately, this move actually loses Clinton his advantage. Now, this, I mean, I think I would even make Clinton's move here. The actual saving grace is bishop to f8, and that's if you see it. If you don't see it, it's a crazy move. But this move just makes perfect sense. It just seems to make perfect sense. Only if you don't see the tactic, then I mean, this is the best move you play. If you see the tactic, maybe you play a different move. But this move loses all the advantage for Clinton. Why? Because it gives Clinton's opponent the chance to counterattack, and it's a very deadly counterattack. It begins with the move rook takes g7. The only move. Any other move was losing. This is the only move. And the point is, after king takes, your opponent has knight to f5 check. After the king moves, which is the only move, then your opponent takes the bishop with a fork on your two rooks. And this is just crazy, right? When I saw this move, I was like, wow, that is sad to see. But Clinton undeterred, he goes knight takes b2, knight takes b2, bishop to e4. Again, you want to still keep causing problems. You can't save the two rooks. Eventually, we get queen f2, f5, knight takes f5, knight takes c8, rook takes c8, and a very questionable move by white here, h4. Again, it makes perfect sense, right? You don't like the pin, you don't like the back rank threats, so you make a move to kind of solve it. But this move is really weakening. Again, you can't move it one square because there's takes. So yeah, h4 did not make any sense, and Clinton begins working. King to h7, king to h2, rook to g8, rook g1, queen e8. Now, you should know when to play on both sides of the board. At this point, the queen is not doing anything, so he brings the queen here to possibly support some queenside assault. We have c takes d5, and then queen to e5 check. Blocks, pawn takes. Now you have lots of dark light square weaknesses. This bishop is going to be a beast against this king. Knight d1, we have rook c8, preparing to infiltrate and cause problems. We have rook to e1, and then a beautiful move by Clinton here, queen to a1, out of left field. I did not even see this move coming. We have queen to f4, rook to c2 check, king to g1, rook to c1. Again, more pressure, more pressure. There's not really much you can do. The best way to defend is to bring your queen all the way back. But he decides to go for more active play. His opponent decides to go for more active play, believing that if you take, I can keep checking your king to a draw, I think. But Clinton, calm and collected, plays the move queen to g7. Again, your pieces are still kind of locked to the back rank. They're very inactive. Check. The rook blocks. Rook goes back. Then the opponent gets a little bit greedy here, trying to activate his pieces. But this simple move gives Clinton a very strong continuation. Rook to c6. After the queen runs away, rook to g6. And now you have a very big weakness which you cannot defend. Queen d4. You don't take immediately. I think because of takes. So he goes queen to c7. And now there's no way to stop this from happening. King tries to run away. Queen to g3. Knight to f2. Queen to f3. King to f1. And the brilliancy by Clinton here. Yeah, you can see I'm sort of like a Clinton fan. Yeah, I'm fanboying over Clinton. Clinton, cold, calm, and collected, plays this move. Rook to g1. Obvious. I mean, it is obvious, but it's a very beautiful move because once your opponent takes, you have checkmate, and your opponent cannot also run away. The only thing to do is to take this and get checkmated. It was a topsy-turvy match. There was a point Clinton was winning, and he loses his advantage. It looks like his opponent is gaining ground. Eventually, he finds his opponent makes this funny mistake, and then Clinton pushes and clinches the win. Very, very nice game. We are 26 minutes. This is going to be a very long game. Actually, this game is 119 moves. 119 moves. I did not really focus on this game during the stream, so I don't really have much of what happened in my head. But note that this game was 100% a maneuvering game, and we are not going to go through so much of the maneuvering. So, Frimpong Smart is playing as white here. d4, knight f6, knight f3, knight d5, g6, g3, bishop f5, bishop to g2, e6, castles inside, bishop to d6. Oh, sorry. c4, and it looks like a Catalan. c6, knight bd2, b6, rook to e1, castles, b3, knight bd7, bishop to b2, queen to c7, rook to c1, knight e4, and yeah, I mean, this game is looking very simple here. I mean, if you want to, but yeah, takes. Knight jumps into h8. You can see I'm just explaining. I'm just mentioning the moves at this point. Knight takes, pawn takes, and what happens from this point on is you realize that black begins to take stake or space within white's territory. Black begins to slowly encroach on white's territory. We have bishop to h3. Knight jumps into f6. e6, queen to a5. I'm very sorry. Bishop to c3, and the point is if you take here, you lose your queen, so don't fall for such poison pawns. Queen to d5, bishop to f1, simple plan, targeting here, maybe launch an attack. Queen to e6, rook to c2, g5, knight to g2, bishop to g6, bishop to e2, knight d5. Again, this is a close position. I would not so much mind if you took my bishop. But if you feel like the position is going to open up, which it usually does, you want to keep your bishop to a1 or b2. But we have bishop to d2, f5, bishop to h5, takes, queen to e2, g4, h5, yeah, and then h4, h5. So you can see here that black is really encroaching on white's territory. If white could find a way to lose this knight and this bishop, this would have been a very nice move, but it's impossible now. Ooh. Last game, guys. h5, rook to b1, queen to e7, b4, a6. We are going to the maneuvering part, which is, I mean, rook c to b2, knight to b6, bishop to e1, queen to f7, queen to d1, possibly trying to go and resolve this by trading of the queens. If there's one thing black would love to do is trade this bishop for this bishop, or this bishop for this knight, because the bishop here is really struggling. Knight to c4, rook to b3, b5, bishop comes in, if you took here, you instantly make white's position better. Queen to c2, king to h6, bishop to c3, king to g6, and now we are going to just simply go for maneuvering. Like, anytime I came to Frimpong Smart's game, there was so much maneuvering and I wasn't really ready to analyze. Eventually, the Smart finds a way to break open in the center. There are some exchanges and then we continue the maneuvering. Eventually, he brings his queen and then his rook, his queen and then his knight into his opponent's position, and they coordinate well, creating attacks that Frimpong Smart is forced to trade off the pieces. And then we get into this king, knight, and pawn endgame, where black is slightly better considering this pass pawn. But Daniel doesn't really give up easily. He fights for it. He starts by dealing with the second pawn, the supporting pawn. Takes a short trip with the knight to win a few pawns on the king side, and then quickly comes back. And after king to a1, the move is supposed to be actually king to b3. But after this move, Frimpong Smart sees a very beautiful thing. He goes h4, knight e5, h6, knight e5, and the point is h7. If you take my knight, which is defending this, that is not an issue. You take queen, and if you move your knight away, I just take I just come in and then I'm dealing with the pawn. But if you try to promote here, for example, you get hit with checkmate, check, queen blocks, takes, and then you have this passed pawn. The pawns are just winning. Then we have knight e4, king comes in, the pawn can't push because the queen is pinning the king. And here Frimpong Smart's game, Frimpong Smart's opponent resigns the game. Very interesting round, so many topsy-turvy games. Got my head aching, really struggled. Funny story of Magnus riding a bike late to a tournament. I mean, that was cool. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I always do appreciate you watching this video, liking, commenting, subscribing if you haven't. It really does help me out. And I'll see you tomorrow during the stream. Join me, twitch.tv/Mason, or just here on YouTube. I'll be very happy to see you and interact with you. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.